So Juicy Lucy is a burger, and they cut a hole in it, and they infuse cheese into the burger, and then they put cheese on the burger. So it's just a bunch of cheese, and cheese is my absolute favorite food, if you didn't know that about me. So it's just a bunch of unhealthiness on a burger, and it is the most amazing thing ever. And Matt's Bar has a good one, and the Nook has a good one as well.
All right, excellent. So not great for a pregame meal, but perhaps postgame, pound a few beers back.
Yeah, exactly.
Excellent. Okay. Anything else?
Trying to think. I mean, there's so many things at the State Fair, but that's not during the season. So you won't be able to see that.
Boo.
Or have them. I'll eat it for you, though.
Okay, cool. Just send me a few pics.
Yeah, I will.
All the things you're missing because you're not from the great state of Minnesota. Awesome.
Exactly.
I can't wait. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Founding Four podcast. I am your host, Erica Ayala. Founding Four podcast is a weekly NWHL-centric women's hockey show. We are an independently run podcast hosted by me as part of the growing Sports Talk with ELA podcast network. Founding Four Pod is the flagship sports podcast for Sports Talk with ELA, but we have more coming, including more women's hockey. I'm in the middle of the WNBA finals. My goodness. Game 1 went to the Washington Mystics. Game 2, the Connecticut Sun. So I will be up in Connecticut at Mohegan Sun for games 3 and 4. And for at minimum $1 a month, you can help my independently run coverage of women's sports and women in sport. So head over to Patreon, Sports Talk with ELA. Shout out to the patrons who have helped me get this show back up and running. But all right, back to this episode. Here are a few notes about my guest for this week. My guest is a Maplewood, Minnesota native who played at the University of Maine, where she tallied 45 goals, 25 assists in her 132 games for the Black Bears. As a NWHL rookie with the Riveters last season, she netted a team-leading 8 goals, no assists, more on that later, and was named a 2019 NWHL All-Star. This year, she returns to her home state of Minnesota and will resume the family profession, teaching. Without further ado, here is my interview with Minnesota Whitecaps forward Audra Richards. All right, we're here with another episode of the Founding Four podcast, and I am on with Audra Richards, formerly of the Metropolitan Riveters, newly signed to the Minnesota Whitecaps. Audra, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
I am also fantastic. Thank you for asking. Glad to have you on. Always love interviewing you, if only because you usually think you do a terrible job, and almost never is that actually the case. So I just want us to have fun. It's just you and me talking, and whoever listens to the podcast later. So it's going to be fine.
Perfect. Sorry for all the viewers.
All right. Well, let's get started with, you're coming back to the NWHL and you'll be able to play home in Minnesota. Obviously, I spoke to you earlier for something for the 9 News Honor, and it just sounded like being back home was something really important for you. So let's talk about that a little bit again. Being able to play back home in Minnesota, what are you looking forward to the most?
Like I said earlier, the thing I'm looking forward to the most is seeing my family in the stands consistently every time I step on the ice. I'm also excited that I don't have to move again. I get to stay put in Minnesota, and I get to stay around all my friends and family, and it's just going to be an awesome winter and season.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving's always tough. And so you're back home. But something that I learned pretty quickly about your family is like they're lots of fun. But they can also be kind of brutal. So where does that come from? Like, it seems like the family, they just, you're a family that kind of likes to give it to each other, but in the most loving way possible. Is that accurate? Would you say that that's how your
Yeah,
family is?
we are very, very competitive, and I might be the most competitive one. So I do kind of test my sisters a lot and my dad, because my dad actually, I take that back. I think my dad might be the most competitive one, and we learn from him to give it to each other.
Oh, okay, cool. So, all
I
right.
would say he's the ringleader of it all.
All right, let's give a shout out to the family. So, who all is in the family? What's the pecking order? Where do you fall?
So my mom, Amy, and then my dad, Scott, and then I have my oldest sister. She's McKenna. She is a kindergarten preschool teacher, and then my sister Haley. She is the middle child. She is a dental assistant in an oral surgery center, and then I'm the youngest and the favorite. And I'm just a PE teacher. So that's my family. Very small and fun. Competitive.
Right. Yeah, for sure. All three girls, just like me and my sisters growing up. But what did your parents do for work while you three girls were growing up?
My mom is a secretary at Central College, and then my dad is also a PE teacher in an elementary school in St. Paul at Randolph Heights. But my dad also has a side gig, and he sells mini donuts. In the summers.
Mini donuts?
Yeah.
Like donuts? Like what is it? Like a pastry?
It's just like a mini donut. It's not out east. It's really weird, but it's like a thing in Minnesota.
Oh.
They're just mini donuts that come out hot, and then you put sugar on them.
Oh man.
And then you know what a cheese curd is, right?
Yes.
Yeah, like fried cheese curds. It's like a donut that comes out hot at fairs.
Oh man. What the heck?
Yep.
First of all, I'm a little bit bummed that we're just having this mini donut conversation for the first time. Like, this would have been really good information to know.
Yep. My family sells mini donuts, and my dad has been doing it. Next year will be the 30th year.
Oh my goodness. All right. Putting it on the list for when I come to Minnesota for the next time. I got to learn about this. There are a few delicacies in Minnesota that we don't have out here in the East that I've been learning a lot about. All right. Okay. I'm going to get completely distracted now. But before we go back to food, the reason I wanted to ask about what your parents did is because it seems like there's a through line here of education, because you are also going back to Minnesota to teach.
Yes.
So what was that like growing up in a family that was very much surrounded by education?
Yeah. It was a lot of fun. My dad is probably the best gym teacher any student could ever have. I don't know. I just fell in love with gym because of him. And that's why I'm a teacher. And I know my sister, she kind of wishes she was a gym teacher too, because she sees us having fun while she's grading and doing all the boring stuff. But I definitely fell in love with or wanting to be a gym teacher since preschool. When I was younger, me and my friend at preschool graduation, we said that we were going to be gym teachers half days and work at the same school after my dad retired. That is not going to happen, but I did follow through with being a gym teacher. So it was fun. Cool. I always got to go to his schools and pretend to be the gym teacher because I was Mr. Richards' daughter. So I was Miss Richards to everyone, and I just thought it was super cool to be called Miss Richards.
That is pretty cool. So it's been in your blood for a while. That's pretty cool.
Yes.
So I feel like there is this pop culture stereotype, though, that comes with physical education teachers. But if I'm not mistaken, while you were playing with the Riveters, you were still finishing up some grad school. Is that correct?
Yes. I got my master's at Mankato in health education. And I originally did that because it's easier to get a job in the high school if you have health. But when I came out of college, I got my teaching job that I'm at now in an elementary school, and I fell in love with elementary, and I'm not sure I will go back to high school because I love my little students.
Oh, that's cute. Yeah, very different vibe. Very
Yeah.
different vibe, for sure. All right, cool. So when you're coming up with what to do as far as a curriculum or activities for elementary school students in particular, you have a health background. You obviously are an athlete yourself. How do you mix and balance some of the things from an academic perspective that you're trying to do with students with incorporating some of the things that made you fall in love with physical education, which is the fun part?
I would say I just try and keep things as fun as light as possible for my students, and I encourage all the students to participate. And if I guess my biggest thing is make sure they're having fun and they're participating, and that's what's going to make them fall in love as long as they're having fun.
All right, so now I wanna move toward your hockey career, as many of our listeners here at the Founding Four Pod will know you from your rookie season with the Riveters. And so I think it's interesting because you say that you come from a pretty competitive family, but you also have this background of wanting to make competition or sports fun. So what kind of player are you on the ice? Do you skew more to the fun side? Does the competitive edge really come out, and are you pretty intense? How would you describe your style of play?
I would say I like to have fun, but I have fun through being competitive.
Mm.
Like I get like a rush from being competitive. I would say I'm intense. Yeah, I would say I'm intense.
Yeah.
I get very mad at myself when I'm not doing what I should be doing on the ice, and sometimes it shows in my face. But usually I can calm down and gather my stuff and continue to play. But
Yes.
yeah.
So it seems like it's like a
Like I need competitiveness in my life or I would not survive.
yeah, that's really interesting. I can relate for sure. But like your competitiveness, if we were to compare you to a teammate such as, say, Madison Packer, like your competitiveness, it seems that it comes out in maybe a different way than the competitiveness that Packer is well known for. Would you think
Yeah,
that that's
definitely.
fair?
Yeah.
Not
Yep.
necessarily going to be, scrapping it up in the corners per se.
Yeah. I'm just going to make sure that I don't lose any battles after that if I lose one again.
I like that. I like it. I dig it. All right, cool. So I also want to walk through with our Founding Four fans. We asked them to highlight some games that were pretty interesting and that were memorable. Now, I don't think this is a stretch for you, but not many of the games from last year's Riveters team made the all-time Riveters, list. It was a little bit of a tough season for a lot of reasons. Maybe we'll get into that. But there were 3 games that I thought really stood out that I would love to get your feedback on if you can remember. And the first was a 4-3 shootout victory at home. I believe it was the first Riveters win at home. And you scored a hat trick in that game against Connecticut. What do you remember about that game?
I just remember it being a lot of back and forth, and I just was lucky with the puck. And I wouldn't say lucky. I had really good line mates that were able to get me the puck in a situation where I could pop it in the net. And I think that game, Mie and Grushow were connecting really, really, really well.
Yeah.
And we were just vibing. We were vibing out there.
Yeah, that's right. That was, if I'm not mistaken, Mie's first official game back on the ice. She had come back for the game prior to that. And so you talk about your line mates there. But it did seem that there were times throughout the season where sometimes because of injuries, sometimes perhaps because of coaching decisions, that things were being shaken up. Just generally speaking, when you do feel that you have chemistry with line mates, but then things get switched up, like what kind of a player are you? Are you the kind of player that's going to be like, hey, coach, are you sure you want to like mess with this? Because I feel like we got a good thing going. Or are you just kind of like, all right, coach makes a choice. This is what we're going to do.
Yeah. Usually I get very mad if I feel something's going really well for me and my line mates and it's helping our team. I get angry that things are getting switched up. But I usually don't say anything to coach because I trust the coach most of the time, and they run the squad. So I mean, it's their decision.
Yeah, for sure. I want to talk to you about another overtime shootout victory. This one was against the Buffalo Buttes. The first one was earlier in the season. I want to say it was in November. This now is taking us late in the season. It's March. The Buttes had pretty much established themselves. It was the Riveters and the Whale really kind of fighting, to see who would essentially get to host that play-in game. So a win against the Buttes at this time of the year in March was pretty significant. Again, another 4-3 shootout win there. What do you remember about that game with Buffalo? Notoriously, the Riveters and the Buttes always had pretty intense matchups, and this was one of the last in the regular season.
Yes. I believe that was one of the games when Terry, our assistant coach, came in, and it was, so we had a lot of fire under us, but I think that was a huge thing. He helped us a lot after a lot of things that we went through that everybody understands that I'm not going to say, but I think we just came in knowing that we had to win to come in the top to get home ice advantage for our play-in game. But I would just say we felt the pressure and we needed to do it for ourselves.
Yeah, and definitely was a statement win for those who believe in statement wins. If ever a team needed one, I think it was the Riveters around that time. And then there was another game, and you kind of alluded to this, and I want to stay here for a little bit. You alluded to some of the difficulties, let's say, that the Riveters were having. At one time, it was a goalie situation, goalies coming in and out. Obviously, every team deals with injuries. And somewhere between that shootout victory against the Buttes and then one of the final regular season games against the Connecticut Whale, that was a time where things did get switched as far as your role on the team, and not only your line mates, but on which line you were playing. And so what do you remember specifically about how you were able to just stay focused, as a lot of things for the team and then even for you as an individual on the team were difficult and were changing?
Well, at the end of the season, I was sick. I had strep throat for like a week, and then we played a game. I believe it was in Buffalo. I can't remember what weekend it was, but then I came back and then I had the flu. But I refused to stop playing, and I know that was some of the decisions that Randy had to make, and I understand that. But I knew our team had to win, and whatever was best for the team, that was best for the team. I had to stay focused, and I had to believe that was the right decision.
Yeah, I remember that time. It was a very dangerous time to be covering the Riveters because it seemed like every other day someone else was sick. And it was, that road trip coming back from Buffalo that I remember there was a bug that went around pretty bad. But so you're getting yourself back, your health back, you're getting your strength back. And I remember that it was before this game against Connecticut on March 7th. And, usually you kind of are rolling your eyes when I'm like, all right, Audra, we're going to do some media stuff. But before this game, you actually sought me out and you're like, Erica, look, I'm going to score today. Do you remember telling me that?
Yes, I was coming out of the locker room or something. But I do remember telling you that because I was, like you said, being shifted around, and I felt that I could contribute more to the team than my coach had thought, and I wanted to prove something to him.
And you indeed did score in that game. You scored twice, as a matter of fact, and the Riveters get a 5-2 victory. And again, this is right before we're getting ready to head into the playoffs. So, I mean, it's one thing to kind of like say that, and we weren't on air or anything like that. But it's another thing to go out there and do it. And so, what kind of, and maybe we've already talked about this, but just bring it home for us, Audra. Like, what is it that made you confident enough not only to say that, but then also to execute on it twofold? Because you gave me not one, but 2 goals that game.
I'm not a huge liar.
There you go.
So I had to, I had to do it. I didn't want to lie to you.
Well, that was very considerate. There you go. All right. I love that. Pretty straightforward. I said it. I got to do it.
Yeah, no, definitely. But I knew I had to do something because I knew we were going to win the game, and I knew we were going to head to Minnesota, and I wanted to be in an important role when we were playing Minnesota. Not only because, I live there and there's going to be a lot of people in the stands, but I wanted to have the opportunity to help my team more than I was helping them with what situation I was in.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, you did it. It was great. And so now let's talk about Minnesota. So you have that game against the Connecticut Whale. You get to the semifinals, as it would be for the NWHL. But then, in true Riveters fashion, last season in particular, it became this wild trip of delays. And then I think you guys made it as far as Charlotte, North Carolina, before you had to turn around and come back. What do you remember? A lot of us got to witness that through Kimberly Sass and her amazing social media. But for you, what was that experience like?
Unlike no other, that's for sure. I was just really wanted to get to Minnesota because I wanted to go home. I wanted to see my family. So I was very frustrated with that whole situation. And I'm not a huge fan of sitting in one spot. I'm a gym teacher for a reason. I can't sit. So me sitting in the airport and sitting on these airplanes and we didn't go anywhere was the most frustrating thing I've ever been a part of. But the funny part was we got because we flew out of JFK, I think, but we got a hotel, and we have to get up at 3:30 to get to the airport to try and catch this flight to try and get to Minnesota for the day of game. So we're only getting 3 hours of sleep. And about at 11:30 p.m., someone writes in our group chat and says, "Isn't it daylight savings tonight or tomorrow or whatever?" And they're like, "Yeah, but we couldn't figure out when or how, does our phone change on itself, or do we have to manually?" No, we had to manually change all of our phones because it turned at 2 a.m. and I don't know something, and we had to be up at 3. But more of the story is our head coach didn't even change his thing because we figured it out so late at night. So we had to go wake him up to get on the to get on the bus. So we almost all didn't make it to that airport in time because of daylight savings.
Oh my gosh.
It was definitely a team bonding experience. So
there you go.
Something to look back on and laugh at.
Yeah, for sure. And poor Kelly Nash, because this is, NCAA is already in playoffs. I think she actually beat you all to Minnesota, only to then have to turn around and come right back.
Yep. I felt extremely bad for that human.
Yeah. And Packer ended up there earlier, too. I think it's because she was flying out of Connecticut, if I remember the story correctly.
Yeah.
Wild ride. All right. So a little bit of a delay, some humorous little life moments that you shared with teammates. But then, all right, you finally do get to Minnesota. And now for the Riveters, that meant that if you were going to get to that championship game, first you'd have to go through the Whitecaps. But then you'd be playing Friday, Sunday. And so after a disastrous travel experience the week before, what were the conversations that the team was having about having to now fly out of Minnesota? And if you were able to win, again, have to play with such a short turnaround?
There was definitely a lot of conversations going on just because we had girls that couldn't miss work, which kind of stunk. So we were missing some girls. But I don't think anybody was worried about the turnaround because if we beat Minnesota, we would have had enough adrenaline in our bodies to come and play Buffalo the next day.
Yeah, and I mean it was, it was. Well, let me ask you, what do you remember of that semifinal matchup between Minnesota on that Friday?
Oh gosh, not much. I remember we held with them for a good amount of time, but then sometimes the wheels fall off the bus and we lost track of them for a bit. And then I remember Randy shortening the bench to 2 lines, and he didn't often do that. So my lungs and my legs were just not ready to do that. But I mean, we figured it out, and I thought we skated pretty well with them.
Yeah, I think it definitely showed that the Riveters had some fight for sure, but as you said, sometimes, I mean, that's hockey, that's sports. Another piece of that conversation, and I spoke to Mie Dench after that game. I spoke to Packer after that game. We knew going in it was going to be Mie's last game because she was and is headed off to law school. But it sounded like, and here we sit in August, and I mean, a lot has happened in women's hockey, but it sounded like there were probably some other players in that locker room that were also at least thinking of what next season would look like for them. So, I'm just asking you to take us back into that locker room, and what was your emotion for yourself at the end of your rookie season? But then also as a team, been through a lot as a team, from flights to lots of changes. What do you remember the overall emotion being after that game?
Honestly, I think it was just like any other loss at the end of the season. Everybody was pretty upset. I know a lot of people weren't sure if they were coming back or not. If they're going to retire, what was going to happen. No one knew what was going to happen with everything that's going on in women's hockey. So I think it was just more of the season's over. Like, that sucks. For me, I didn't know if I was going to be playing again or not. So I was like, well, this could be my last competitive hockey game. But fortunately, it's not. I get to play at least 24 regulation games with the Whitecaps. So, I don't know. It's different. Losing a game in professional when you know you could possibly still be playing is a lot different than when you lose in college. Because after your 4 years, you're done. You have no option of going back.
Yeah.
So it was like an emotion that I've never experienced before. But it was definitely the same, like, end of the season, lost the game. It happens, and I mean, it was just sad, I guess. It was sad.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was a tough game. It was a tough season. And again, it was just that locker room in particular. From what Packer was telling me, had a lot of people that needed to make some decisions and do some reflecting. But so we're not going to end on a lull. You are coming back, and hopefully we'll have you back on the Founding Four pod. But let's end with more about these delicious treats. So mini donuts. What are some other Minnesota delicacies that fans and reporters now have to make sure that they try when they go see you play with the Whitecaps over at Trier Rink this season?
I would say Matt's Bar has the most amazing Juicy Lucy burgers. So Juicy Lucy, do you know what a Juicy Lucy is?
I do. I just learned about this on my last trip, but let's explain it to everyone listening.
So Juicy Lucy is a burger, and they cut a hole in it, and they infuse cheese into the burger, and then they put cheese on the burger. So it's just a bunch of cheese, and cheese is my absolute favorite food, if you didn't know that about me. So it's just a bunch of unhealthiness on a burger, and it is the most amazing thing ever. And Matt's Bar has a good one, and the Nook has a good one as well.
All right, excellent. So not great for a pregame meal, but perhaps postgame, pound a few beers back.
Yeah, exactly.
Excellent. Okay. Anything else?
Trying to think. I mean, there's so many things at the State Fair, but that's not during the season. So you won't be able to see that.
Boo.
Or have them. I'll eat it for you, though.
Okay, cool. Just send me a few pics.
Yeah, I will.
All the things you're missing because you're not from the great state of Minnesota. Awesome.
Exactly.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
All right, Audra. Well, I am going to let you go. But again, we're glad to have you back for the next season. I mean, I won't be as glad when you're playing the Riveters, but whatever. We'll figure it out.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, here's to more awkward interviews.
I'm so excited.
All right, Audra Richards, thanks so much for coming on the Founding Four podcast.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure to chat with Audra. Thank you so much for joining us on the Founding Four pod. Again, that was an interview that I recorded with Audra in about August. So she and the Whitecaps return to action not this weekend, which is opening weekend for the NWHL, but they return to action on Saturday, October 12th, 2 p.m. local time, 3 p.m. Eastern at Tria Rink, as the Whitecaps, reigning Isabel Cup champions, host none other than the Metropolitan Riveters. So that should be a fun one. And before we close out the show, a note. You might have heard me mention Audra has 0 assists, or had 0 assists in her first season. Now, I like to tease her about this a little. We actually have a little bit of a wager going on. Richards really wants me to buy an Audra Richards jersey. I actually don't own a jersey. I own a few jerseys, don't have a jersey. So here's the thing. I'm totally down to support players and buy a jersey. However, Richards has got to get a few assists this year. Now, I want to make sure that we are offering incentive for her to have more assists, but not necessarily dissuading her from scoring. Although if she doesn't score and light the lamp against the Riveters, I personally will be fine, but that's besides the point. So here's the deal. Mentioning this on Founding Four Pod for the first time. I will buy an Audra Richards jersey. I'm going to up the ante and make sure that Richards signs the jersey, and we'll give it away here to one of our listeners on the Founding Four Pod. But you have to help us between this week and next week. So before October 12th. You have to help us decide on the terms. Again, have to have assists incorporated, and don't want to dissuade her from scoring altogether. So use hashtag founding4, that's the number 4 pod. Use hashtag founding4pod. Offer up your suggestions. We have a few, but still haven't decided on anything. Both of us have to agree and, virtually shake on it. And then if and when Audra Richards reaches that goal, as stated in the terms, I will buy the jersey. I'll make sure she signs it, and we'll give away a Richards jersey. All right. So again, hashtag founding4pod. You can also reply on Twitter at founding4pod. If you want to follow me, you can follow me at elindsay08, ELINDSAY08. And finally, and as always, a special thanks to all of the patrons and listeners that support this show. We switched things up a little. We're independently run now, but we appreciate all of you who have already subscribed. We're on Transistor FM now. That's who hosts our show. But you can also find us on TuneIn, Stitcher, iTunes, all over the place. So make sure you're subscribing. Get your fix of the Founding Four Pod every week. new episodes drop on Thursday. And until then, bye-bye. All right, enjoy opening weekend. Okay, bye.